Welcome to this reading on the call coming from inside the house, where we reveal the self-sabotage that you engage in. Go ahead and take your time with your piles here, and whenever you're ready, the timestamps are down below. I'll see you there. Alright, so if you chose Judgment, Pile 1, this is your reading. Now, this is a reading on, like the title says, the call that's coming from inside the house, the way that you self-sabotage. And I picked out 3 of these archetype cards to basically describe who it is that you are in this moment, where it is that, like, you are at this present moment. And the Lenormand here is basically just going to confirm and echo that. And this part of the reading is basically just for me to know who it is that I'm reading for, and for you to get confirmations that this is in fact your reading. So this is pretty much just an energy check, just confirmation again. It might play into the rest of the reading, into the question of how it is that you self-sabotage, which will be answered by these 2 tarot decks, 5 cards each, one answering the question of what the sabotage is, and this one answering, or rather shedding some light on advice, what you can do about this self-sabotage. So to get into it, who are you? We have the Avenger in its shadow attribute, the Monk, Nun in its light attribute, and Teacher in its light attribute. Okay, so Avenger in its shadow attribute is resorting to violence in the name of a cause. Monk Nun in its light attribute is selfless devotion and single-minded dedication to spirit. I hope you can see that. Yeah, just making sure. Okay, cool. And Teacher in its light attribute is ability to communicate knowledge, experience, skill, or wisdom. What these cards tell me is that you are someone who you know violence, in whatever aspect that it is that you know it, whether it's like actual physical violence to whatever degree, verbal abuse or violence, emotional violence, whatever the case, you know it, whether it is that you yourself have inflicted it or it has been inflicted upon you, and this violence has, or rather you've taken those experiences, and you've now decisively you've chosen to take those experiences and use them to, if not full out teach others from those experiences, you're willing to share your wisdom from those experiences. You are very comfortable in getting or just speaking up in situations where you can see that your experiences and what you have to say and what you know can help who it is that you are speaking to. You could actually be a teacher or be very religious with monk, nun, and actual teacher. And with Avenger, again, with that resorting to violence in the name of a cause, that doesn't really seem like necessarily a bad thing. To me, all that comes to mind is like someone who protests, someone who's willing to, beyond just someone who protests, someone who understands that action is sometimes the best course, and not necessarily violence per se. I'm just going to state it bluntly. What comes to mind is just riots work, right? And that kind of mentality, where you understand that in some cases we do have to resort to such drastic measures, and it's not always called for, it's not always justified. It's very, it's all about just cause. But whatever, that's like a debate about ethics and stuff, and that's for another thing. But basically, what I'm getting from Avengers and its shadow attribute is that you have an understanding of that. You have again, either you've inflicted violence or it's been inflicted upon you. That could be true. And or you have an understanding that sometimes it is necessary, if not full out violence, then direct action, then action beyond just passiveness. And again, if whatever the case is, you are willing to impart the wisdom that you have with other people. You're willing to share what experiences you've had and the wisdom that those things have inflicted upon you with other people. With Lenormand, we have clouds, birds, yeah. Okay, yeah, see, look, like clouds is sadness, birds is talking to a lot of people, and bouquet is abundance and happiness. So literally, communicating with a lot of people, this sadness in the past, and there being like something that you gain from this. So like a teacher actually gains, like they're paid to actually impart what they know with other people. So if it's not that you're actually getting paid in like this isn't your job to teach other people, there's some satisfaction that you gain. It's like a bouquet of flowers that you receive. It's something satisfying. It's something fulfilling to you. So, okay, if this sounds like you, cool. This is your pile. Let's answer the question of how it is that you self-sabotage. Okay, so this is gonna sound really rude and really mean, but again, self-sabotage is very rarely comfortable, and in fact we tend to do it. These are tendencies that we take upon more often than not to regain or take control of a situation that we kind of become fearful of. So please understand that whatever messages are coming through, it's not it's not me getting a kick out of calling you out, because that's not what this is. But this sabotage has to be called out as honestly as possible, so that we can then address it as honestly and as head on as possible. So that being said, we're going to start from the middle, and then this tells me one thing on this side, and then these two other cards tell me another thing on the other side. So the Knight of Cups reversed tells me that you can be emotionally impulsive. You do have a tendency to lead with your emotions, and while there are situations where that is definitely the best thing to do, there have definitely been situations where you have allowed the way that you feel about something definitely stand in the way of something that those emotions that you were having warped the truth about. What I'm saying is that you can be biased, and that bias, that emotional bias, warps the truth of certain situations, and you're kind of comfortable in doing that. on this side, with the Six of Wands reversed and the Seven of Cups, instantly and very obviously there's this movement from 6 to 7. So in situations where you can progress, in opportunities that can either just grow who you are, or, you know, be an actual like financial opportunity for you to grow your wealth, you tend to, one of the ways in which you self-sabotage is that you might walk away from something that is showing all good signs. Everything's good. You can't find anything wrong with it. In fact, it all feels really great. But you have other options. You might like to keep your options open. You having just one thing, the idea of just committing to this one thing kind of scares you. And so you'd rather keep your options open rather than pursuing this one singular thing that does require your attention. And you kind of shoot that victory, that potential victory, in the foot by, one, not putting your focus into it enough and kind of placing that focus elsewhere upon other opportunities that might not have the potential that this singular thing has, and that could blossom into something great for you if you gave it more of your focus, whatever that might be talking about. On the other hand, you have a tendency to allow your ideas to reign supreme over other people's ideas. You like to take command over certain situations, whether it's that you do like your ideas to have more weight than others' ideas, or in situations where it calls for collaboration, you tend to think that your ideas are best. You'd rather go with your ideas, your input, rather than, you know, because there are cases where, yeah, you do need to put your 2 cents and you need to stand your ground, you know, put your foot down. But there are definitely situations where it's definitely called for some compromise, for you to, you know, maybe put your 2 cents out there and understand that that everybody who's involved thinks someone else's idea is a better way to move forward. And this is one of the ways in which you sabotage, is that maybe you'd rather just be right. You'd rather be the person in charge rather than let things flow for everybody involved. So, heavy stuff, I know. But again, this is what we're talking about. Self-sabotage. These are the ways in which you get in your own way. Like, you do have like opportunities that could blossom into good things. Commit to it, and understand that there are times when you need to compromise, when you kind of just need to be like more go with the flow, one of the team. It's not always up to you to be the leader. It's not always up to you to be the smartest, the most right, the best per se. And there are times when you are going to benefit most from approaching things emotionally, but you will benefit from understanding that there are times when you can feel what you're feeling, but still do something that goes against how you're feeling, just because you understand that this thing, despite how you're feeling, is the best course of action, like compromising or like committing. So, how to address it? We have the High Priestess, Wheel of Fortune, the Four of Swords reversed. Okay, 3 majors. All right, the Hierophant. Okay, 4 majors out of 5. The Devil, and wow. Okay, so we have the Hierophant next to the Devil. Incredible. Wow. Okay, so let me just take a minute here to kind of look at this and figure it out. Okay, so the 4 of Swords reversed there's one definite message, and then there's one like maybe if it fits your situation. If you feel called to, there might be huge benefit from you taking some time to away, some hermitude, a little bit of time to really reflect on these things that you sabotage on. Especially, I guess, this is true. What I'm saying right now is true if you've recently had one of the situations that we were talking about in the way that you self-sabotage, whether it is that you've kind of shot a really good opportunity in the foot by not, putting your focus into it as much as you should be, or if you've kind of like made something not work because of how unwilling you were to compromise in that situation. And if something like this is something that's currently weighing on you, then the Four of Swords reverse is saying that you might want to take some time to really reflect on that, away from external influences, where you're really it's just you focusing on how it is that you feel about all of this, what it is that happened, what it is that you want to do about it. And if whether or not that's true with the Four of Swords, now that's kind of that message that I had, that the Four of Swords was telling me. But to get into what all of these cards are telling me, again, very neatly, this side is telling me one thing, these two cards is telling me one thing, these two other cards are telling me another thing. And this center card is really kind of the anchor of it. But before we get into that, the fact that there's 4 majors, and they're all upwards, and the only reversal is a positive reversal, in the sense that the Four of Swords reversed is coming out of a stagnant moment. What the 4 majors tells me is that you are blessed. You are a blessed and protected person. And so this is why you have so many opportunities given to you, and why you have kind of like victory, things with really high potential kind of not handed to you, but available to you. And why this situation kind of tells me that someone who's comfortable being this loud is because they are listened to. And so that's one of the ways in which you're blessed, that you are listened to. But okay, like I was saying, the Four of Swords reversed is about coming out of a sense of stagnancy, coming out of repose, coming out of a moment where you are reflecting, where you are kind of pausing what it is that you're doing in order to really take in what happened and how it is that you want to move forward. And that's why I was talking about that message is, if this is something that's happened recently, you might want to take some time to focus on all of that. And after you've done that, then come out of that time of reflection and consideration, willing to do the work, willing to address these ways that you self-sabotage. And one of the ways that you address it is by taking a step backwards, and not in the sense like I was saying, and taking a step away from external influences. That's true. But the Wheel of Fortune is the big picture. It's about us being able to see how we exist in the grand scheme of things as one thread in the grand tapestry of life, if that's what you want to call it. And the High Priestess is a deep understanding. It's a capacity to see beyond what is directly in front of us. So these two cards together, the High Priestess being about having the capacity to see a grand scope, and the Wheel of Fortune being the big picture, these two cards is having the capacity to see the big picture. And that's one of the ways in which you will address these self-sabotages, by looking looking back at past situations in which you haven't been able to commit to certain things, and the ways in which that has affected you, what you've missed out on rather, and really reflect on whether the things that you pursued instead were worth the thing that you lost. And that again takes a lot of internal maturity, which is the High Priestess, again, that capacity to see the big picture, and that doesn't come easy. You have to work at that, and if you know, but yeah, like and also like look in past situations at times where you really have cost other people, cost the group something because of how you insisted on being right, how you insisted on being taking charge of situations. um and not just looking at these things in the past, but also like now being aware of the ways, like putting an effort in seeing the ways in which you do this presently, and doing this work of looking at these things in the past and the present, so that you can kind of not do that anymore, or do that in a better way as you move into the future. The Hierophant and the Devil is pretty much saying you can be one or the other. Like, they're basically, because they're opposites, right? Like the Hierophant is basically like the priest, the highest priest, and the devil is like the antithesis of the church. And I don't really get like this whole exorcism kind of idea here, which that could definitely be a thing that could be said by these two cards, but that's not what I'm getting at all. It's very suitable for these Halloween readings. But anyways, what these two cards are telling me is that, kind of how I was saying earlier, is that you are someone who is listened to. You hold influence, you hold attention, you hold, like I said, influence, and what's the word that it was right at the tip of my tongue. You hold sway in certain situations, in certain groups, if not in all groups. There are some people who can just walk into a room and people just listen to them. They open their mouths and people listen to what they have to say, and you could be one of these people. And that is a great gift, a great power, if you will. And if you can be very responsible with that power, and you can use it for the greater good. You can use it to be a teacher, like we were talking about earlier, and impart that wisdom and teach others, initiate others into their own wisdoms, in ways that you have gained your own, teaching them not exactly how you gained yours, but like teaching them and imparting your wisdom in ways that allow for others to find their way into their own. And that's, you using your powers for good, basically. But if you aren't careful, if you allow yourself to continue to self-sabotage, you could be the devil, where instead you're using your sway and your power and your influence to overpower others and basically rob them of their agency and everything else that you're robbing them of, right? Of what they want to do in some cases, or just even, you're even robbing yourself of opportunities. You overpower things with you not wanting to commit, which is also kind of like the devil, right? Where it's kind of like the angel and the devil on your shoulder, and it's like, which one are you going to listen to? The one that insists that you continue to sabotage, or the one that insists that you ascend into a higher state of being? I hope that helped. I will catch you on the next one. Bye. Alright, for those of you who were called to the moon card from the Tarot of the Divine, this is going to be a reading. Now, in this first part, I picked out 3 archetype cards and 3 Lenormand cards, and this is basically to, 1, give me an idea of who I'm reading for, and 2, to give you confirmations that this is your pile. So this is basically answering the question of who you are. Again, for me to know who I'm reading for, and for you to know that this is your pile. And these things that come up here might play into the ways in which you self-sabotage, which will be answered by the tarot cards up here. Now, to hop right into it, who are you? Who the hell are you? Oh, nice. So we have Child Magical in its light attribute, and we have Liberator and Child Eternal in its shadow attributes. And it's really interesting that you got 2 of the child cards. I think there's 3 of them, but I can't remember the other one. Okay, so to read these cards out to you and what they say, we have Child Magical in its light attribute, seeing the potential for sacred beauty in all things, the belief that everything is possible. Liberator in its shadow attribute says, imposing your own tyranny over those you claim to liberate, ignoring legitimate constraints. And Child Eternal in its shadow attribute reads, inability to grow up and be responsible, extreme dependency on others for physical security. And so these 3 things tell me that you are someone who you probably carry a lot of the weight of the world, in the sense that because you so badly see how great things could be, whether at a grand scale with the world or in the environments that you find yourself in, you tend to be dissatisfied with anything else, with any reality, no matter how much of a progress any reality might be in respects to how far it's come. That may never satisfy you in respects to or rather that won't satisfy you in contrast to how something like your idea of its potential might satisfy you. And although that's a visionary's kind of mentality, it's a visionary who can see the potential in something and see it beyond what people can accept. That's a good thing. The fact that it's being attached to the shadow attributes for Liberator and Child Eternal give this idea of the way that you can look at things and its potential, and the ways that you are uncompromising in accepting any reality that is beneath that potential does stand in your way. It is something that costs you, whether it's opportunities or joy, and I mean that in the sense of it's costing you opportunities in that maybe there's really good opportunities that come your way, but because they are beneath your idea of what the best opportunity for you might be, you just won't even glance at this legitimate thing coming your way. Or if it's joy, it's that in your way of looking at things, that you're looking at just the highest potential and you're not accepting anything less than that. You kind of rob yourself the joy of enjoying the reality as it is now, or as you create it with your seeking of that potential. With Liberator in its shadow attribute, the thing that really stood out to me the most is ignoring legitimate constraints. And so legitimate constraints being kind of reality, and light attributes for Child Magical being the belief that everything is possible. So believing that everything is possible without being able to see legitimate constraints. Again, this idea of, it's a visionary's mentality. You don't limit yourself in the way that you think of the ideas that you have, and that is a very good thing. However, because you don't rein that in, it stands in your way. And one of the things that's coming to mind is that one of the ways this could stand in your way, in the ways in which you stand in your way with this thing that you do, where you only look at the potential, is because you're only thinking of the potential, or you're only focusing on the potential, you're not really putting any effort into creating that reality where that potential is a reality. You kind of just rather think about it and believe that this impossible thing is possible, but you kind of flounder when it comes to figuring out exactly how it is that you're going to make it happen, because of your inability to see legitimate constraints, where a legitimate constraint, constraints and restrictions are bad things because they, by definition stand in our way, but those are obstacles that are basically, when we overcome them, we solve that problem and we have answers. So you ignoring those obstacles, I kind of see as you not even wanting to take it on. You don't even want to take on those obstacles, because again, you'd rather just think on this thing and its potential. And that kind of partners really well with this idea of the child eternal's shadow attribute of inability to grow up, that immaturity, of not being able to take your ideas past that like brainstorming phase where all you see is the potential, and taking it past that, maturing it past that into a place of bringing it into reality. So that's kind of rough. I do apologize, but this is where we're at. And again, this is just to kind of give you, like, this should be answering or confirming where you're at currently. These things that I'm talking about should be things that you're kind of realizing about yourself. So it really shouldn't feel like too much of a lashing, so much as it should feel like, okay, I kind of had that coming. If this feels like completely out of left field, and it's not, none of, this is just not true about you, don't see it about yourself, then this is simply not your pile. But if it is, if that does sound like you, and if what I'm saying is hitting every right chord, then let's continue. Lenormand should basically be echoing what this says. Okay, so the first thing that came to mind with Dog and Heart was Scooby-Doo, and it was also like supported, that the idea of Scooby-Doo was supported by like the two child cards. I recently watched the Scooby-Doo live action movie from, like, I think it was 2006, and wow, what a trip to watch something from way back when. Anyways, they choose Scooby-Doo to be a sacrifice because he's pure of heart. And Dog in Lenormand is all about loyalty, about steadfastness to either a person or something that you just are dedicated to. And Heart is, it can be like love, romance, but then it's, in this case, I'm taking it as what the child energy is touching upon, which is just your capacity to lead with your heart. And if that's not with your emotions, then just with that capacity that I'm talking about, with you being able to see beyond what others can see. Some might call that an imagination, a great imagination, kind of like I called it earlier, a visionary's mindset. But there, in other instances, that might be called like heart, like you just have a lot of heart. And that's kind of what I got here, this dog with a lot of heart. And I'm not calling you a dog, but it's more so that in these cards, how they're describing you is someone who, you're very steadfast to the things that you believe in. Again, the belief that everything is possible and your inability to see anything else. You really cling to, you're loyal to that part of yourself. And it's because that's just who you are. It doesn't feel like this tremendous effort for you to be this way. This is just simply who you are. And Mountain, which is all about an obstacle, being the obstacle that this creates, where with Mountain here at the beginning and sort of at like towards the left, so sort of in the past, it could very well be that this mentality that you have was molded, or you were molded through something in your past that created this way of thinking and viewing the world and things. And that's why it's so natural to you, because it was so formative for you to begin thinking this way. There is also this kind of idea of you have been elevated, mountain elevated, into this mentality. So this isn't so much an obstacle or a bad thing, so much as, oh, okay. So what came to mind was how when we're growing up, or at any stage in life, when we are under any certain type of stress, or rather not any certain type of stress, but like high stress, one of the ways in which we adapt is to, or rather we adapt to high stress situations. And that's kind of what I got with the elevation, mountain being struggle and obstacle. It's that this way of thinking is one of the ways in which you learned how to protect yourself, one of the ways in which you learned how to survive in certain environments or in specific environments of your past. Which again is why it's so concreted in you. It was formative for you, and not just formative, it's something that helped you survive this climb. So it's now just kind of molded into you, this mentality and way of thinking. There could also be, just to throw out there, and that's just a confirmation, you have friends, or a close-knit group of friends, or a friend with which you have gone a lot with. Like you've gone through a lot with them, and that's created a lot of loyalty and trust between the two of you, or between this group of people. And that's something that I want to phrase it like it gives you a lot of heart, but basically like it's a big part of your heart, rather. And this is specifically true. Take this as a confirmation if you definitely know you're in the right pile, if that's true, and if within this group of people, or if within this relationship, this way of thinking has come into play, whether as a problem or maybe not, like as a solution, maybe as a good thing, who knows. But okay, to continue with the reading, if this is who you are, we'll hop into answering the question of the call coming from inside the house, the self-sabotage that you engage in. Okay, so before I even begin, I do want to say that I can see how the glare is kind of blocking view from the hangman, so I'm just going to kind of hold it here for a second just so you can look at it real good, and then I'm also going to kind of hold it here when I talk about it. But before I even get to that, how do you self-sabotage? Well, plain and simply, you run away from the work. You don't like to work. You don't like work. That sounds really rude, and I know that it does, but that's kind of what I'm seeing here. And it's not so much, it might not even be that. It might not even, you might be sitting there like, no, I am a hard worker. I can get to work. Sure, I'm sure you can when properly motivated. But this is the thing that I'm seeing, is that when there is no motivation, when you don't really see a reason, what's in it for you, or you don't see a benefit to that work, you will not do it. Or if you can find a way to get out of that work, you will. Why am I saying that? It's because it's repeated time and time again. So the 8 of coins upwards shows labor, and in fact the 8 of coins is the traditional card of labor and patterns and just habits, things that we constantly do and are willing to do. Labor. So then it's coming up reversed, and at the very beginning of your reading, and right next to it is the very next card in the sequence, which is the 9 of coins, which you could kind of say is the one benefiting from the fruit of the labor that precedes it. So in the 8 we're doing the work, in the 9 we're enjoying the wealth that comes from all of that work. And in fact, the Nine of Coins is traditionally associated with wealth. So you don't want the work, you just want the wealth. And the Hanged Man here is all about stagnancy. It's all about, outside of the context of this reading, the Hanged Man taken on its own tends to highlight or direct us towards a time where we pull away and we listen solely to what divinity, what God, what the universe, whatever you believe in, is trying to teach you. There are times when we kind of have to go with the flow and put into practice things that we know, and then there are times when we need to pull away or pull ourselves away from the world, from other influences, in order to really internalize, first of all listen, and then internalize what it is that the universe, what divinity is trying to tell us. Excuse me. But the Hangman, which is about pulling away from activity, next to the Emperor, which is the card of activity, and not only just any activity, but structured activity that has a purpose. So work, stagnancy next to work and structure. You understand the structure, you understand the things, the work that you're being called to do. In fact, you might feel like there's something that you want to do, a structure that you want to get into, but at the very center of the reading is your anchoring energy, how you would prefer to not get into activity and sort of just observe. And if not observe, then just intake information, learn, and if not those things, then just not do anything. So that's just going to depend on who you are as an individual. The Three of Wands, which literally in the card literally shows someone run, like, just, she looks like she's in a hurry, like she's trying to get somewhere fast. And I kind of see it as like her running away from the Emperor, running away from the labor, which again, you're running away from that work. The Three of Wands talks about elevating one's self, elevating ourselves to wait for what we know is coming our way. In a mundane aspect, it's us waiting for a shipment we know is coming. In a more spiritual sense, it is us calming ourselves because we have been told and it's been confirmed to us that something is coming our way. And so again, this idea of stopping all activity to observe, to intake information, not doing things to benefit from something else, which in the case of like the Hangman and the Three of Wands is like, in the Hangman it's taking in information from the universe or divinity, and in the Three of Wands it's just waiting, being patient, because we know that patience will be rewarded. So the ways in which you self-sabotage is that when there is a call for labor and structure, you would rather not do those things. You shy away from putting into action the things that you are receiving when you are in inactivity. Before I continue, I do want to say that these two cards, and that just, you probably do receive a lot of really good information. Like there's a reason why you kind of shy away from it. You probably feel like there's more to gain from you watching, but oh my god, I'm remembering The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I haven't watched that in years, and I don't know why the quote just came to mind, and I'm probably misquoting it because again it's been years. Life is not a spectator sport. It's a contact sport or something like that. And that's basically what I'm getting from this, where there's only so much you're going to gain from watching and taking yourself out of the game that is life. At some point, you're going to have to get in there and make happen the things that you want to make happen. Bring into reality those impossibilities you're so good at seeing, like we were shown with the archetype cards earlier. So, I'll be honest, this is pretty mild. Last pile was pretty intense, so this is nice. I like this. This isn't that bad, I'm gonna say. I mean, obviously you stand in your way with not getting in there, but I just had to throw it out there. Like, just there are worse things you could be. Okay. Moving forward, what's the best way? The question that I asked with these cards is, what the best way for... let me start again. The question that I asked these cards is, what is the best way for you to address the ways in which you self-sabotage? Ooh, nice. I love this, like, cups, coins. Oh, okay. Okay, 10-10. But we go from suit to suit. Okay, wow, okay. Sorry, I got excited. That's exciting. Exciting because, like, 3 cups cards and then like 10-10 and then it ends with a major. But okay, let's read these. Okay, so there is definitely something that happened in your past as to why it is that you simply just struggle with getting your hands dirty, with getting in there and participating. And why I'm saying that is not only because of what we saw with the archetype cards in the Lenormand, with the mountain being at the past, and with the child cards both being there and all that we talked about. All pages are representations of youth, and the 6 of Cups is traditionally associated with nostalgia and remembering the past. And these cards are both together and on the left side of the spread, which traditionally is associated with the past. So, and they're both reversed. They're the reversals in these 5 cards. So again, definitely something that happened in the past that for sure shaped how it is that you kind of look at the world now, and why this way in which you self-sabotage. The Page of Cups upwards is someone... Oh my god, excuse me. The Page of Cups is the energy of being excited. Let me rephrase that. Not being afraid of whatever comes up emotionally. So depending on how you relate to your emotions, this is going to make sense or it might not make sense. If you are someone very comfortable with your emotions, then you know what the Page of Cups energy is. It's just when you can express it very comfortably, whatever comes up, or you're just comfortable feeling whatever comes up, whether it's like, you know, I don't know, like they brought back your favorite drink at Starbucks. That's something that like really excites you and you're happy expressing it. Cool. That's Page of Cups energy, because not just anybody's gonna get excited over something like that. Not to like rag on you or anything, that we all have our thing. But that's what I mean, is the Page of Cups energy is us being true to the things that are coming up emotionally. And it's coming up reversed, which indicates a repression of what is coming up emotionally, a disconnect between these things that are surfacing, feelings that are surfacing, and how we are relating to those feelings. Attached to this card of nostalgia, it might have been taught to you how to suppress those feelings, or just maybe to suppress all feelings. So if you were brought up in a masculine body, then you understand that the patriarchy basically demands from a young age that you kind of, you know, not feel anything. And the same can be said for girls too. Let's not ascribe gender to that, but basically what I'm saying is these 2 cards together and reversed kind of tell me that something taught you in the past, something really shaped you in the past, something may have even hurt you, because there's three cups cards all together, and the cups are all about emotions, very heavy emotional energy. And so there's a lot of emotional work to be done, because these cards are answering the question of how best to address this self-sabotage, of you running away from the work that needs to be done. And part of that, not only just addressing the things in the past that caused this, but also understanding that the joy, or rather not the joy, but just joy itself, is attached, is inherently linked to labor. The 10 of Cups is the full spectrum of emotion. So not just the good ones, but the bad ones too. But it's not... The 10 of Cups upwards describes an understanding that even with the sour emotions, even with the negative ones, life is still great because there exists the positive. The 10 of Cups upwards speaks to a capacity to hold the entire spectrum of emotion without being thrown by it. And right here in the center of your spread, it talks about you having the capacity to know this great joy, not only because it's a joy absent of the sour emotions, but because you have a capacity to hold space for the sour emotions while also enjoying the benefits of the good ones. And that being inherently attached to labor, because the 10 of Wands is a card of labor. This dude's carrying the weight of all of his wands home. So it's not only about labor, it's about bringing home the fruit of one's labor. And that fruit here being described as this ultimate joy. Basically what these cards are saying, or these two cards are saying, is joy comes through labor, and you won't know that until you throw yourself into that labor. So if you've been wondering why you can't get joy, ultimate joy, why, if you feel like there's all these obstacles that like feel impossible to overcome, they're not. In fact, it's in overcoming those impossible obstacles that you will inherently learn and come to understand yourself as an achiever of the impossible, like we were getting with Child Magical. You inherently see the full potential of things. You have this visionary's mindset. Well, you could achieve that vision. You could achieve all of those things that feel impossible, but it is going to take a huge amount of work, and that could very well be why you shy away from it. Fair enough. But this is basically a confirmation for you, basically saying, get started on it. There's a reason for why you were given such a mindset, and there's a reason for why the obstacles feel as big as they do. They feel as big as they do because they're meant to mold you to be capable of overcoming such gargantuan obstacles. Don't ask me where gargantuan came from. It just popped up and I'm glad that it did, because I never get to use that word. But okay, finally with the star. I love the star here because we move from the Page of Cups energy, where we talked about you being very comfortable with diving into whatever emotions pop up. And again, the pages being youth, and therefore to some degree immaturity. I kind of see the Page of Cups as someone, again, just willing to just dive headfirst into whatever emotion comes up. But the star, there's a maturity to the star, because there's vulnerability, as we can see by her nudity, but she doesn't dive in. She knows better. She knows that there's fun to be gained by diving in and going for a swim, but there's also a lot to be gained from sitting and just reflecting and looking at the reflections on the surface of the pool of water. And this comes up at the very end, the major. The star, aside from being a card of vulnerability, is traditionally a card of hope. And that idea of hope echoes to me what we were talking about with the child magical card of you being able to see the impossible. And not only that, you not being able to accept restrictions. You being very able to see past any limitations. And that's hope, because I mean, I kind of struggle to say like we live in hopeless times, because I feel like anybody at any point in history would have said that, because there's always something to catastrophize. But I kind of think that hopelessness is sort of, okay, this is going to sound really sad, but I swear I'm not this pessimistic. I kind of just feel like hopelessness is a part of like humanity's experience that we're meant to overcome. And so the card of hope being the final card in the answer to how best to address your self-sabotage. It's a marriage of both, again, your capacity to recognize what it is that's coming up emotionally. Water, right? She's on top of water. Cups is water. Water is emotions. The capacity to sit where your emotions are and drawing inspiration from that. She stares into it. She reflects upon it. She gains from, in this context, those emotions. And I kind of see that as like you giving space to the ways in which you have that visionary mindset, giving space and priority to the ways in which you can see the impossible, while also understanding that you need to marry that with putting in the work, putting in the effort, and maybe even applying that mindset of impossibility, applying your great imagination to the ways in which you labor. And what I mean by that is that maybe part of why you struggle with getting to work per se is because the ways in which you see the work has to be done you just don't like it, or it just doesn't feel right to you, or it just seems dumb. Well, then maybe you need to apply your visionary mindset here and find new ways. Maybe that's your role in doing this work, is finding new ways, finding easier, more efficient ways that others can take advantage of, if that's what you choose, if you choose to share your methods. But that's just one of the things that I'm seeing, where again with this star energy, you acknowledge your capacity to sit where your emotions are, but you also understand that there is so much to be gained from not diving in, but just taking inspiration from it. I kind of see it as like, I'm saying oh my god because I don't know if you play video games, and if you don't, this is not going to make sense at all. But if you play video games, you know how in some video games there's like a special kind of vision that you can use to like see special items or whatever. That's kind of what I'm seeing, where the star is this skill that you gain, where you can tap into this mentality of seeing past what's possible in order to find solutions, in order to find a way through, without you getting lost in there and kind of just being like, well, it's so impossible that it's never going to work. Well, yes, it can. How can it work? And then you applying that mentality to finding solutions, not just seeking the impossible in what could be, but also seeking the impossible in how to make it work. So you not only leveling yourself up, but leveling up that skill that you have of seeing the impossible. So again, this is all such a nice energy, like, because the answer in essence, and I struggled so much to get it out, but point blank, what the star is saying is to be yourself. Be yourself. Be that indomitable person who isn't going to just accept the way that things are. You are willing to see past that. You're willing to see past the ways that is acceptable, and sometimes that might drag you down, and sometimes you might feel weighed down by the ways that those things feel so completely out of reach. But maybe why those things feel out of reach is because you haven't tried to make it possible yet. I hope this helped. I hope I didn't just ramble on. I'll catch you for the next one. Bye. Alright, for those of you who were drawn to the Five of Wands of the Santa Muerte Tarot, this is your reading. Now, for this portion of the reading, which is all about the call coming from inside the house, the self-sabotage, self-sabotage that you engage in, this part of the reading basically answers the question of who you are, and it works in two ways. In one way, it helps me to understand who I'm reading for, and in a second way, it allows for you to look for and find confirmation that this is your pile. If what I'm saying here doesn't sound like you, your current circumstance, or it doesn't sound like something that could happen for you, this is not your pile. But if it is, then we get to continue into the reading with these tarot cards over here that answers the question of how you engage in self-sabotage. So okay, I picked out 3 archetype cards to answer the question of who you are, and the Lenormand should pretty much just echo what that's saying. So to get into it, we have Addict in its light attribute, Exorcist in its shadow attribute, and Virgin in its light attribute. These are so appropriate for Horror reading, Exorcist and Virgin, perfect archetypes for a horror movie. Addict too, I guess, in some ways, because it's like two different opposing archetypes, but whatever, that's besides the point. Or is it? Light attribute, to read it, it says, helps you recognize and confront addictive behavior. Exorcist in its shadow attribute says, fear of facing your own demons. And Virgin in its light attribute, maintaining symbolic purity of heart and spirit. Okay, so what I'm getting from these cards, there's a couple of things that could be true, and they sound kind of different, so I'm not so sure that both could be true, but if it is, cool, hey, double confirmation that this is for sure your reading. But I see it more as two separate things that could be true. On the one hand, it could be that there is your current in your current circumstance, you understand that there's something to be gained, or there's something to protect and maintain by confronting something difficult. So something to protect and maintain, I'm getting from, Virgin, which maintains symbolic purity. And if I'm not really diving too deep into the whole purity of heart and spirit, so much as just maintaining yourself. And the difficult thing being the, facing fears, which is difficult in and of itself, but so is addiction. And even someone in its light attribute, which is someone who is helping you to confront addictive behavior, that in and of itself isn't easy work. Working with addicts isn't easy. So both of these cards, Addict in its light attribute and Exorcist in its shadow attribute, give me this idea of really difficult energy that you have to sort of maneuver through. But not only that, in its maneuvering, you have to also maintain something. And that might be what makes this so difficult to maneuver through, is that you also have the responsibility of either maintaining yourself, your health, your stability, whatever it is. And if that isn't true, the other thing that I'm seeing is that you are currently facing an addiction, whatever that is, and that you're struggling to face it, but that in the facing of that, there's something to gain. If not maintain, there's definitely something to gain in the facing of this addiction. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something you're addicted to. It could be something just very difficult to overcome, like an addiction. So if you aren't addicted to something, but you're currently, like, one example is your semester 1 of like grad school or whatever school you're going to, you understand that this thing is something that you're going to have to work long and hard and keep at it, kind of like an addict's work, which is like, it's every day. You don't just wake up one day and you're sober. Like, you have to make this decision every day, every hour if that's what it takes, every minute if that's what it takes. And so there's this sense of dedication to this thing that you have to do, and there being a bit of struggle and a bit of fear to wanting to do all of that work, but you having an understanding that moving towards the future, there is something huge to be gained from going through with that, basically. And why I'm looking at this card, Virgin, as a victory, as something to begin, as a reward, it's basically because I'm looking at the Virgin as the final girl in any horror movie, because I immediately saw that, like I said, this is perfect archetypes for like movies, and I'm seeing this as how there, in some movies, whether horror or not, there can be like great character progression, and those are my favorite stories, where we start out one way, but through the trial and tribulation of the story, you either gain or regain a part of yourself that was lost in this tribulation that you were before this thing that was happening in the movie. There's always this part at the beginning of the story where there's a hardship, and through the trials of the story, that hardship that we started with is sort of resolved, and it's almost like you're cleansed and purified from that hardship, and at the end you're clean of that. And Virgin being attached to these ideas of cleanliness and purity, that's what I'm getting. Like, at the beginning, you coming in with this hard addict nature, and through the facing of your fears, which is difficult, you cleanse yourself of all of that energy. So if that sounds like something that kind of describes where you're at, or something that you kind of want to make happen, then let's kind of continue. And again, Lenormand should basically be echoing or kind of piggybacking off of what the archetype cards are saying. Okay, I might have been onto something with you taking on a big task like school, because letter is all about, like, you know, documents and writing things. And although there are definitely other Lenormand cards that could better suit school, like book or tower, letter next to mountain, so like correspondences and communication next to the card of like a huge obstacle that's going to take a while to overcome, kind of does echo to me school. And then at the beginning of this, to face these things, the card of strength, of inner confidence that you kind of need in order to take on this huge thing like school. Like, you have to know what you want to do, you have to have this strength of character and conviction in order to make it through school. And if it's not school, then definitely something that you understand, you've come into a grasp and understanding and inner confidence and inner strength that you are starting to use as motivation, as fire, to get you through some type of communication or correspondence, either with like a person or something. Because since it's attached to this like obstacle thing, letter and like correspondence with an obstacle kind of gives me this idea of like, oh god, what's the word? Like when you have to deal with the government and you're like sending documents back and forth to get something figured out. Kind of something like that. And that in and of itself, like to take care of that, you need to have some sort of conviction. You have to have something that you want. Otherwise, why are you going to go through this hassle? So, okay, kind of specific, kind of random, but if these things sound true, this is your reading. If these things don't sound true, if they don't sound like they could possibly be true in any type of future, sorry, not your reading. Try to find another one. If not, I'll catch you for another one. That being said, let's just continue. Alright, so to answer the question of how you self-sabotage, 3 things are coming across clearly. And I have to say, it's worth mentioning, kind of neat, that each of the piles has kind of taken on this format where there's a center card that divides this half and this half. So that's just super neat. Wasn't even shooting for that. But, and yeah, these 2 cards tell me one thing, these 2 cards tell me another, and then the middle card kind of pulls them together. And it is telling me kind of this third thing to kind of give you the bullet point list. These 2 cards are basically saying that there's no sense of urgency when it's called for. The Hierophant reversed is telling me that you don't listen when you need to, or who you should be listening to, maybe what you should be listening to. And these 2 cards are telling me that you tend to clock out. You tend to not focus as well as you should or could in situations that really demand and require your focus. The 9 of Pentacles is a card of wealth, of abundance, of the material world. And why I word it that way is that the Santa Muerte deck takes on the ideas of tarot and puts them through a lens of death. And so to a soul that is unattached to a physical form like this skeleton, a wealth of material matter it drowns that. It overwhelms the soul. And that's why in a body, the physical experience overwhelms the soul. And so that's kind of why he kind of looks like he's drowning here. But what came to mind with this card being reversed is that in the Rider-Waite, the Nine of Pentacles has a snail on the floor, and so when the card is reversed, I always focus on that snail at the now being at the top of the card, so there being a highlight on this snail pace, moving really, really slow. And the Knight of Swords upwards is traditionally a card associated with a quickness, maybe even impulsivity. And so reversed, those things are no longer true, they're negated, which means that there's a lack of impulsivity, a lack of quickness. And so these two cards together, the Nine of Pentacles reversed, which again reminds me of a snail pace, moving slow, and the Knight of Swords reversed being about not moving fast. And then there's reading these two cards answering the question of how you self-sabotage. You tend to move slow when a fast pace is definitely called for. And if that's not true, then you move slow when you would benefit so much more from moving fast. And why this is coming up, this wouldn't be coming up if you were not capable of moving faster. It's self-sabotage, which means you could do better. Moving forward, the other two cards, why I'm saying you kind of clock out and you sort of don't put as much focus as you could be. The Page of Pentacles is an energy that is paying attention to their immediate surroundings. They're paying attention and learning from their environment and the material matter that surrounds them. So it's kind of like a child learning object permanence, and that's kind of one way to understand it, where and every other way that as we grow, our intellect sort of levels up. That's one of the ways that we can think of the Page of Pentacles energy, where it's ways in which we find new ways to learn from our immediate surroundings, from the material realm, basically. And so then reversed, it's you no longer being willing, you no longer being open to learning from your surroundings. The Four of Swords upwards is a card of repose, of stopping movement, of pausing movement in order to, in some instances, listen to yourself, or reflect on situations that have passed in order to gain from what kind of happened there, or maybe even gain something from processing those things. So the Four of Swords is definitely a card of stopping to listen. Reversed, it's then us not, or rather pressing play again on that pause that we took in the Four of Swords. The Four of Swords is pausing in order to reflect. The Four of Swords reversed is hitting play again, so because the reflection is now over. But in the context of this reading and attached to the Page of Pentacles reversed, I'm kind of seeing these two cards as, one, you not being willing to listen to your immediate surroundings, and two, you not even being willing to stop long enough to get the necessary data that's trying to get across to you, either from your immediate surroundings, or in some cases even from divinity or your intuition, or whatever the case may be. You have a tendency to just not be open to those things, and that's where the idea for the Hierophant of you not listening is coming from. The Hierophant upwards is a teacher. It's someone with the wisdom to not only wisdom that they've gained for themselves, but they have the capacity to impart this wisdom upon others. And it's not just about teaching their own specific wisdom, it's about teaching one's wisdom in a way that allows for others to gain their own. And so reversed, it kind of corrupts that energy. It turns more stubborn. is the word that I'm looking for. And so stubborn in the context of like this energy, it's you not really listening when you should be. You not listening to when, you know, a little bit of urgency and speed is being called for, and a little more focus is being called for, and you not really being open to that. Again, these messages are coming up because you are capable of more urgency and of that focus, and because you are actively missing out on things because of this self-sabotage. Now, to answer the question of how to best address this sabotage, we have the Queen of Swords, the Four of Wands, the Two of Pentacles reversed, the Emperor reversed, and the Star. To answer the question of how to best address this self-sabotage, the advice is self-mastery, and specifically self-mastery, and not only in you becoming a master of your own habits, and you know, you really learning what it means to how you operate, but also understanding that you're going to have to find what works best for you, meaning what's worked for others isn't going to work for you. And that's especially true if that's why you shy away from kind of the urgency or the focus, is maybe you kind of associate those things with a certain kind of structure that you don't want to participate in. And what's being said here is that you have the capacity to then figure it out in a way that works for you. Now, to get into the specifics, that we have the Queen of Swords on one side and the Star on the other, that these two cards are book-ending the entire reading that's answering the question of how to best address this. There's this, both of these cards represent to me discipline. The Queen of Swords is someone who understands that there are places and spaces for boundaries and for a tight defense, while there also needs to be a space for openness. Both need to be true, and that is maturity. And the Star holds both vulnerability while also the control to not dive in when, even though that's possible. So she just peers into the pool, she gains what she needs to from it, but she doesn't stick more than, I mean, she's not even sticking her foot in it. It's just her foot lays on top of the water, not even piercing it. And so this idea of just kind of looking but not needing to immerse oneself into something. Discipline. And the Emperor reversed, especially right before the Star, it gives me this idea of other people's structures not working as well as your own way is going to work for you. I also kind of noticed how there's a reversed 4, a major 4, which is on one side, and an upwards minor 4 on the other side of the Two of Pentacles. Now, before I get to the 4th thing, the Two of Pentacles upwards talks about us maintaining some sort of dance, some sort of struggle, just maintaining something because we understand that there's something to be gained from that struggle. You know, in some, like, just the example that came to mind is like, you know, for the holiday season, I'm going to take on a second job just because I know that I need the money, so it's worth it. And so we take on, you know, the balancing act, the dance, the juggle of taking these things on because we understand that there's something to be gained from it. Reversed, then, it's us putting one thing down because we no longer want to do the dance. We no longer see that this struggle is worth maintaining. And so this idea of no longer maintaining something that's kind of costing you for the sense of just choosing one thing and that kind of being a relief, and that this energy being attached to a heavy energy, major, being released, reversed, and the minor, lighter, energy being chosen and that kind of being a relief. What's interesting is that both of these cards are about structure, because the number 4 is about structure. But the Emperor is the type of structure that cannot be argued with. It's society itself. It's how, we can decide that we don't agree with society standards and we can live that way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're not still going to get certain glares or looks or judgments from society because we decided to live that way. And so that's what the Emperor is. It's an overall structure, while the minor 4, the 4 of Wands, is the type of structure like a home, which is more singular, more individual, which again gives me this idea of your own structure that's going to work for you being one that you built for yourself individually. So what works is going to be something that works for you. The discipline that needs to be applied and that you need to learn is going to have to be your own brand of discipline. And I'm assuming that I'm wording it that way. Why it's coming through that way is possibly because you struggle with either the status quo, the ways that you understand discipline to be learned, or you maybe have, up until recently or up until this point, really seen discipline as something that you're not capable of. It is, but it has to be on your own terms, because again, you're stubborn. You're not going to listen to, I'm assuming, other people or whatever the case is. The Hierophant reversed at the center and at the top, kind of overlooking the whole reading, gives me this idea that you're going to do things your own way. And you're not really going to care what other people have to say about it. And that's a good thing. You really are meant, you're shaped, you're meant to be the type of person who does things your own way. And that is meant to be something that's going to gain you power, position, queen energy, the star, major energy. And why the star is like queen energy, it's not so much because of the female energy here, but because the star comes after the devil and tower energy, which is very chaotic and volatile energy, and the star is meant to be this the first light that we see in the darkness, and then that light grows into the moon and then the sun, which are the next 2 cards. So the star is this first gleaming light of hope, which in and of itself is like queen energy. So how do you self-sabotage? You tend to lack a little bit of urgency. You tend to not listen, and you tend to sort of clock out and not really put focus in when it's kind of called for. And so naturally, the best way for you to address that is through discipline, but not just any type of discipline, your own specific brand of discipline. And in fact, it'll be easier to figure out what that is when you let go of the definitions that you have for discipline, for urgency, for focus, for openness and vulnerability to listen, vulnerability to be open to new opportunities, in order to create structures not just for yourself, like obviously yes, for yourself, but structures beyond just discipline. The way I'm kind of looking at it is like, if you figure out this huge task of disciplining yourself in your own way, what can't you figure out? Because that's already difficult. Like that in and of itself is like difficult, because you're basically going at it without any help, without like, how did other people do it? Obviously that doesn't work for you. So if you can figure that out, the rest is cake. I hope this helped. I'll catch you for the next one.